My group and I decided to focus on the study of the effects of stress management programs in middle schools. We decided to do this topic because stress is impacting adolescents in a major way, and many people have been neglecting this specific age group. The amount of stress that is experienced by present day middle schoolers and their extreme lack of proper coping skills have been linked to psychological and emotional disturbance. Along with this, there's also problems regarding behavioral adjustment and academic performance in school. So in this experiment, a pretest control group was created and designed to determine the effectiveness of a 10-week stress management program on middle schoolers. The non-control subjects showed a lower degree of stress than those in the control group. It was shown that providing the middle schoolers with instruction and practice in applying the skills via a structured stress management program would result in a reduction of stress that they experienced in their daily lives.
I'm going to be explaining the method of my experiment. So basically there was 54 participants in total. They were all middle schoolers. There were 38 females and 16 males. They were all separated into two groups, the controlled group and the uncontrolled group. They were separated randomly. So the independent variable in this experiment was the cognitive behavioral stress management program. This was a 10-week program where the students would meet with these teachers or coaches or test takers on a weekly basis. Also, the students were separated into homogeneous groups, which means girls were girls, boys were boys. For the students, the control group who got this program, they were separated into three groups so that they could be homogeneous. So they separated into two female groups and then one male group because there was a significantly less amount of males than females. And then the females group was just too big, so they split it up into two. So in this program, participants learned a bunch of stuff. The first thing they learned was the difference between stress versus stressors. The second thing they learned was the difference between eustress and distress, which is basically eustress is kind of good stress because, like we learned, some stress is actually really good for you, and then distress, which is the stress that's bad for you. And they also learned to recognize the signs of stress. They also learned to self-observe cognitive and physiological responses to stressors. So in the program, they also learned about something called calm body, clear mind, which is kind of a type of lifestyle, whereas if your body is calm, if you're in a calm state of mind, if you're not putting too much stress on your body, then your mind will kind of reflect that in being clear as well. And they also, in their last 2 weeks of the sessions of the 10-week program, they learned how to problem solve. So at the end of this program, they took two tests. The first one was adolescent stress and coping measure, kind of self-explanatory. They just took a test that evaluated their kind of stress and how they cope with it. And then the second test was the state trait anxiety inventory, known as Form Y. This was the second test. And this just kind of evaluated the participants' anxiety. And that's it for the method. So now to the results.
Hello, I am here to talk about the results of our study. It has a significant finding of 0.05. In the dependent variables on the pretest ASCM and STAI, they were very much equivalent to one another except for one variable, which was the cognitive control. In the cognitive control, the control group was higher than the experimental group. In the stress management program, the students who took the program had lower degree of stress on both state portions, the STAI and the ASCM. The experimental group with the STAI had lower scores but had higher control. On the ASCM, the experimental group, the scores did not change but had higher control. In the trait portion and frequency of manifestations of stress, there was no differences in any of the groups. After the pretest, the cognitive control coping with stress had a toll. The control group had less than the experimental group, which had very much everybody's eyes since it went the opposite way after the pretest. In the relaxation methods, the control group had less effectiveness, but the experimental group had a success rate of 65.7% improvement. The effectiveness of the coping strategies. In the program, the significant increase with the students. But if you see in the table 2, that was given to us in the study, the ratio of adaptive to maladaptive coping strategies, the experimental group had higher adaptive strategies than the maladaptive strategies. But the control group was very different. There was a higher increase in the maladaptive studies than there was in the adaptive studies. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I will discuss the conclusion and discussion portion of this adolescent stress study. The adolescents who participated in the stress management program reported a significant increase in the effectiveness of their coping strategies for stress. This means they were able to feel less stressed. The cause of this increase is because of the systematic instruction the adolescents received. The experimentalists also explained how systematic instruction was superior to the trial and error application of coping strategies. The trial and error application actually discouraged the use of adaptive coping strategies due to the decrease in the strategy's perceived effectiveness. The trial and error application would have led adolescents to maladaptive coping strategies. The decrease in the strategy's perceived effectiveness was due to the adolescents in the control group. While performing this experiment, the experimentalists believed identifying signs and symptoms in the stress management program was an important component. The participants in this experiment were able to identify the signs and symptoms early in the findings. The signs were recognizable when the adolescents were able to control the degree of their stress experienced. They controlled their stress to a cue to cope. Overall, the experiment was a success. It increased the adolescents' use of cognitive coping and relaxation. The adolescents were able to deal with their stress and decrease the degree of their stress. Before we end this presentation, we would like to ask you a few questions. If you know any adolescent, what strategies do they use to cope with their stress? Do you believe they can feel less stressed with systematic instruction? If not, what are the ways you can help adolescents decrease their degree of stress? Thank you.